The reason we meet is to share what we've learned about our investigations about the nature of consciousness. It's the only place I know of that is actually doing spiritual research, as amazing as that may sound. There's archaeologic research on religious history, and for that you need a little pick and a pith hat, and you go out in the desert and you hope to find something. But that doesn't really advance human knowledge, you see, really. So what's unique about these talks is that we've discovered a means of investigating the nonlinear domain. We found a means of investigating that which is unknowable by ordinary means. And I share with you my own experiences as consciousness advanced throughout this lifetime, and my own awareness of reality as I experience it. So it's both subjective and, in terms of the world, objective, in that we have discovered a means of verifying truth that's never been discovered before, which makes it a very useful tool. And of course, everybody here is pretty aware that we discovered that kinesiology itself made a very incredible tool available to almost everyone if they calibrate over 200, and their partner does, and their question is over 200, the results are valid. We didn't even know that when we wrote Power versus Force. We said we thought anybody could do it, and then I would get letters from people that they were unable to make it work, and they were trying to find out how to get even with their mother-in-law or make money on the stock market, and it could be the intention behind those things, I don't know. But I began to suspect that, and then we discovered that if the question needs to be integrous, the intention is what really sets the calibratable level of consciousness. The two people involved both need to be above 200. So it works, therefore, only for about 15% of the population, which I didn't know when I wrote Power versus Force. I think when I revised it for Hay House, so I did put that in there, the caveat that the purpose has to be integrous. The discovery was that kinesiology was asking a question of the field of consciousness. Consciousness registers only that which is. Consequently, the other error in Power versus Force, as I said, it was true versus false. And the correct explanation of the phenomena is it's either true or not true. So because that which is real exists, then that which is real registers within the field of consciousness. That which is unreal, that which the world calls false, has no independent existence, does not register in consciousness, and therefore gives you a weak response, and in terms of the world, a no. We said it's more analogous to an electricity going down a wire. When the electricity is there, it's on. When the electricity is off, it's not on. But there is no independent, existent thing such as offness. That's an important point to get. There is no such thing as offness. And we'll get to that more later in the lecture, because the lecture is supposed to be about what's it about today? Yes, well, anyway, whatever it's about. It's extremely important to realize this essential truth. That there is no such thing as offness. We'll expand upon that later. Yes, today we're talking about positionality and how to transcend positionality, because the undoing of the ego is based on a whole series of positionalities of increasing elaboration. So we'll talk about the structure of the ego, its origin, how it expresses itself in the human domain. and how, therefore, to transcend it. A great deal of information itself is transformational. To merely hear certain things already resolves the problem. It's not going to rain today. That takes care of that one right there. You see what I'm saying? One worry just got eliminated. You know what I mean? So certain information itself is transformational because it's so powerful. And if you calibrate the level of certain pieces of information, you'll see why they are so powerful. Everything occurs, we could start with the paradigm of context and content. It's crucially important to understand that what the ego experiences is content, and what enlightenment is concerned with is context. That God is the ultimate infinite context, and that all of existence is then content. All that exists is content. And nothing comes into existence except for context. Therefore, God is the source of all existence. All that exists arises solely as a specific creation of God. You know? We spoke about that when we were differentiating evolution from creation. That contrary to the ego's thought that causality works like a series of billiard balls, on the contrary, every single moment, because of creation, all that exists, its existence is because it is simultaneously and at every moment being created by God. So God doesn't hit ball A and then go through all the next 14 balls until it comes out at the end, which is the traditional idea of the evolution of evolution. On the contrary, each and every movement of each and every ball is an individual creation of God. God creates this, God creates this, God creates this, God creates this, God creates this. So that the Creator is continuously present, so that all that is happening is a continuous creation, which seems to be sequential because it's perceived sequentially. But perception is not causality. So to start out, help you digest your breakfast, I thought we'd start out with this. Which will take us from the Buddha nature right down to breakfast. I thought we'd start with an easy one. So we start with the simple awareness that the unmanifest is the Godhead. In other words, out of apparent nothingness, the Buddha's void, the Buddha nature is the unmanifest, having no form. Let's see if the unmanifest is the Buddha nature, yes? We have permission to ask this resist. The unmanifest and the Buddha nature are one and the same, resist. Yeah. So this is what the Buddha was speaking of then. Because in the enlightened state there is no form, there is no thingness, there is no positionality, there is no time, space, or any point of reference. So it seems void. But the ultimate reality is not nothingness. The error which I spoke about previously, and which I wrote about more extensively in the book I'm finishing now, is not to confuse the Buddha's void with nothingness. Because, as we said, there is no such thing as offness, neither can nothingness exist. One branch of Buddhism leads you into the void, and I've been there. It's very, very impressive. It is extremely impressive. And one is certain this is what the Buddha spoke of. However, it is not. Nothingness cannot exist, and any more than offness can exist. If we have something here, we say there's something here. If we take it away, You have nothingness, but you can't give me a piece of nothingness because it doesn't exist, all right? Okay. So the unmanifest then is that which is prior, you might say prior to the universe, which is just a way of languaging it, you know? The next realization is that one is all that is. So I forget the calibrated levels of these. I think I've got it somewhere else later this morning. Each one of these, you can calibrate these levels of awareness. This would be 1,000 and up. Manifest as the ego disappears, there's like an agonizing shock, a feeling of literally dying. People worry about physically dying. You can forget about worrying about physically dying. There's nothing to physically dying. It's a snap, you're out of the body, it's fantastic. You wonder why you ever hung out with that stupid thing? And don't forget, 99% of your fears and worries have to do with the body. Survival, money, health, transportation, food, eating, breathing. I mean, my God, it's a really drag. So the minute you're out of it, just say, oh, this is fantastic. And then somebody shakes your knee and it's your father and you can see he thinks you're dead. Oh, shit. He believes in death. You see, he believes in death, and if you don't go back in the body and breathe again, he's going to grieve. Well, if I'd been a true Buddha at that moment, I would have left it. It was his problem. But I wasn't a true Buddha. It was just an enlightened state, but not the ultimate. So one then reluctantly re-energizes the body, which is a terrible mistake, but anyway, you do it. That was very codependent, right? We call it codependent. You agree to stay alive so your father won't grieve over your death. I mean, that's really neurotic, you know? But that's what happened, more than once. All right, so in that state, one is all that is, the everythingness of allness. This is self, the awareness of reality as allness, the oneness and allness, complete totality, infinitude beyond beginnings or endings. And in that state, one knows that which I am has always existed before this universe, before other universes. When all universes have come and gone, that which I am is continuous, because one, that's experiencing God as allness. The state prior to that is the awareness, these are states you can reach through meditation, and we'll get into that in another lecture. When you in meditation get to identify with the observer witness rather than the content of consciousness, I should have started from the other end. We should start with the dog here. The dog is barking and my leg is hurting and my name is George. And you are stuck with form. As you begin to meditate, you see that all this is going through your mind and you say, this is hopeless. I cannot stop the mind. It's relentless. It's thinking all the time, feeling all the time, imagining things, remembering things. It's a cacophony. It just goes on and on. So at this point, the ordinary person, as they walk around in the universe, 99.9% of people identify with form. And that's why they're so preoccupied with health and wealth and death and all that kind of thing. Because they are form and they identify life as form. And this is, I am the body and I am the content of the mind. The person, as they start to get involved in spiritual work, begins to realize that there's a step beyond that the mind is somehow registering somewhere. I say to people, I can't stop my mind, I can't do this and that. I say, well, how do you know what your mind is doing? You're complaining. What are you complaining about? Well, so you must be aware of what the mind is doing. So it's registering somewhere. So this begins to pull you back from the identification with content. And you see that something is registering what's going on in the mind. and that something is recognizing the registration of form. And then you come to the watcher. Before you get to the watcher, you get to the experiencers. So here is the form. I am George, and I'm 14 years old or whatever, and my dog is here. And you say, well, this is registering in something, and because I'm recognizing it, and I'm experiencing it, and you begin to realize that there's a watcher of all this. There's a knower of all this. Somehow there's a spotlight, there's a lens, something is aware, and you realize that there is awareness going on of the observer and the witness. As you go beyond the observer and the witness, you wonder how does light... First of all, you begin to realize these are impersonal. You realize that observing and witnessing are happening of their own. There is no you that is watching and witnessing, although in the beginning you have the illusion that's you that's watching and observing, except that you then begin to notice it does it all the time without being asked. So if it was you, you could control it. You could stop witnessing, you could stop watching, you could stop observing, but you begin to realize that this is happening of its own. And you disidentify that with that, and you see that that is coming out of consciousness itself. And so you, as you see, you progressively let go identifying with content, and you're progressively expanding and identifying with context. So this is very, very limited, this is very specific, very restricting, and this is completely content when you're ignoring the context altogether. Here you're ignoring context. As you move up, you begin to relinquish your identification with content, and you begin to realize that that which you are is context. It is because of consciousness that any of the lower states can occur in the first place. The reason you realize they're not you is because you have no control of them, and you see they're happening spontaneously. Consciousness is there in and of itself without being asked. You can become unconscious of consciousness when you go to sleep. And that's the oblivion. That's not the void, that's oblivion. And many people like oblivion. And why do they like oblivion? Because it's so peaceful and happy. Well, how do you know it's peaceful and happy? So you weren't oblivious, you were aware that it was peaceful and happy, and you said it to everybody how well you slept last night. So something is aware. Anyway, and so we move up these levels and realize that that's where we are at the top. Everybody realizes now that you're the unmanifest, right? We wanted to demonstrate for the doubting Thomases here. Stand up, doubting Thomases. Where are you? Let me just ask if we can do this. This is a valid piece of paper, resist. This is a bounced check, by the way. For those who doubt the accuracy of kinesiology, I think it's always fun to have a bounced check. So we do that at every lecture too for fun, because so far the person has obviously not deposited the money, because it still bounces every time we check it out. All right, so the value of kinesiology then is that it affirms that which has existence, that which is true, and for the first time in human history gives us a means of differentiating truth from falsehood. The discovery that you can differentiate truth from falsehood anywhere in time about anything is so mind-boggling that I don't think anybody on the planet has grasped the significance of it, including myself. It sort of blew me away for some years, and a number of people, when they first read the prior manuscript of Power versus Force, went to Europe for a couple of weeks and to just recover from the shock of the discovery that for the first time in human history, mankind has some means of navigation other than credulity, in other words, other than faith in others. Mankind has some means of telling truth from falsehood. Well, when you look at the history of mankind, it's a disaster. The history of mankind is really a disaster. If you don't think so, you watch the History Channel a couple of nights and it'll change your mind. Well, the consciousness of mankind, was about 190 for many, many centuries. And 87% of the population, or 85%, calibrated below 200. And therefore, such things as the current situation in the Middle East is the way the whole world has been. Not just the Middle East, the whole world's been that way. All of Europe was ravaged by one horde after another. All of Asia was ravaged by one horde after another. It was just one civilization plundering and savaging another civilization continuously. And it goes on right up to this very day. Hasn't changed at all. If we calibrate the energy of the Middle East right now, it'll be about the same as the dinosaurs, I would imagine. Can we have permission to do the Middle East resist? The Middle East is over 65. Oh, the Middle East is over 60. 65. Geez. It was 70, it's gone down. We have permission to ask about Mr. Bin Laden resist. He's over 65 resist. No. So you see, let's do the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs were over 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65. Very interesting, isn't it? So, we see the evolution of life. So we'll have to, in the book I'm finishing up, trying to track the evolution of consciousness as it appeared on the planet and then evolved throughout time, on up to the present day. I'm trying to recapitulate life and all of its expressions, especially as consciousness and as all of life, throughout all of time as it evolved on this planet. I thought I'd do that before lunch. It makes me warm just to think of it. So. Anyway, that's what we're doing. And but you see that life then appeared. What happened to our diagram? Oh, anyway. It appeared out of the unmanifest becoming manifest. And the light of consciousness then shone forth. And creation arose out of the unmanifest as the manifest. So God as unmanifest is infinite potentiality. That's the one. So this is infinite potentiality. Infinite potentiality. Therefore, the infinite context of all of creation is unmanifest. The context is infinite. The capacity of the unmanifest is beyond man's imagination, and no writer has really has really gotten what it is. The unmanifest has the capacity for creativity. It's innate to its nature. And all that it creates has within it the nature of that which created it. So that creation is continuous and infinite. Therefore, we tend to think of the Creator as creating this world. A more sophisticated person thinks of the Creator as creating our universe, the infinite universe. But beyond this universe is an infinite universe of universes, each of which is at faster than the speed of light, creating an infinite series of universes. Yeah? Is that so? We have permission to ask that, resist. That is so, resist. Out of an infinite series of infinite universes are arising simultaneously faster than the speed of light, infinite universes continuously. Therefore, that sort of expands one's concept of the Creator. Nothing comes into existence without having come from God. Nothing within the physical domain has within it power. It has within itself only that expression in form that we call force. Nothing that exists has the power to create its own existence. Nothing that exists has within it the power to create its own existence. All that exists arises from God. Yeah? All right. So this, out of the unmanifest arises the light of consciousness with its infinite power, interacting with matter, and we have life united with matter. And creation as we know it then is the lighting of matter by the light of consciousness as life. The life then evolved on this planet through very rudimentary forms. It did not occur spontaneously as a happy accidental combination of chemicals, as sort of pedestrian science would have you think. Don't forget, science is on different levels too, and what people think of as science varies all the way from the somewhat stupid to the brilliant. Just because it's labeled science doesn't mean that it's highly intelligent. Very often it isn't. And anyway, the lowest levels of science then are concretism, literalism, and reductive materialism. So anyway, according to that theory of evolution, then there was a happy combination of chemicals that began to breathe and think, which is, unlikely. Why is it unlikely? Because you're mixing categories. There are two different categories of existence. Materiality has no capacity for consciousness. It's very obvious to anybody that thinks about it that for anything to evolve has to have a pattern. And where would this pattern arise? Well, the pattern arises in consciousness, and then it manifests in the physical domain. So all power is within the field of consciousness, and what we see is the evolution of form. But the evolution of form is only a result, a consequence of that which is evolving in consciousness. How can we say that is? Because we see the progression of complexity and function throughout the evolution of life on this planet, from the smallest little bacteria at the bottom of the sea. The small little bacteria begins to multiply and begins to learn. So we see qualities of consciousness now accompanying materiality and physicality, because learning is not something that chemicals and molecules do. So the evolution of consciousness then, and as it manifests in form, we see as the evolution to higher and higher forms. And we see the complexity of form increasing. We see not only complexity of form, but we see aesthetics. We see aesthetics, the incredible beauty. If you watch the Nature Channel long enough, you're stunned by the incredible beauty and the complexity of the design and the discoveries made within the physical domain. The fish at the bottom of the sea that know how to produce electricity, they knew how to do that 500 million years ago, long before we discovered electricity, phosphorescence. And the electric eel, in the days of ancient Greek, they used to treat depression by taking electric eel and shocking you with it. A certain number of people in Duality recovered, probably, just so you don't get hit by that electric fish again, if nothing else. But anyway, as we see the evolution of evolution, you see the evolution. What you're really seeing is the evolution of learning and the capacity to store learning. So you needed a brain then to store the learning in the physical domain. You see the evolution of life becoming more and more complex. But you see sort of two trains of life. You see the train of life which lives at the cost of other life. And it reaches its maximum at the level of the dinosaur. The dinosaur, which from an aesthetic viewpoint is a bad-looking hombre, lives by chewing you up. Anything that's smaller and weaker, it eats you. So it maintains its life at the cost of the life of the other. We might say that it's the height of egocentricity. The reptilian world, the world of the dinosaur, is the ultimate me. Fulfill my wants. If you want to mate, you knock the female down and you mate her. And if you want to eat something, you kill it and eat it. If something is in your way, you knock it over. Very much like preschool. In preschool, you're not allowed to eat your other children. We train them to eat cookies. Unless you get to be a famous boxer, in which you can go back to eating people again, or their ears anyway. I don't know. I didn't know how to hold that, whether it's humor or ridiculous. I don't know. To bite the guy's ear off. Well, it's a great publicity stunt. All right, so you see the evolution of this level of consciousness is all egocentricity. So when we calibrate 65, we were just calibrating extreme selfishness, huh? Is that what we got? 65 is really extreme selfishness, resist. The absolute, the ego as God, resist. Yeah, right. That's the level of consciousness of the serial killer, of the shoe bomber. Can you believe there is such a thing as a shoe bomber? Can we do the shoe bomber? Is that guy over? That guy's over 70. Or is it 75? Or is it? He's 75. Well, he's a little bit beyond Tyrannosaurus Rex. He probably uses the bathroom. You know what I mean? Tyrannosaurus Rex didn't. So he goes from 60 to 70, 65 to 70. All right. So see, because we're trying to differentiate good from evil too. You see, when you recontextualize it, you see it what it is. So the dinosaur then is only interested in me. That's Bin Laden. Bin Laden only cares about expressing his political views and dramatizing them. It's all me. So you might say evil is nothing but the extremity of the ego. The ego is God. And you certainly see it in, who's that, Milosevic, Stalin, Hitler. You see it in all these people that don't mind killing 70 million people out there because they don't deserve to live. They have no rights. There's only me. The dinosaur is not concerned with the life of anything else except its own jaws. So you see that evolution of life then coming up as rapacious, victimizing others. It has no concern for anything other than its own self. So you might say the dinosaur is the epitome of the egomaniac, the megalomania which characterizes people like Stalin and Hitler and Milosevic and Nero and various people. In another book I'm working on, we're doing about 1,000 calibrations. We're doing all the famous people of history, etc. And it's sort of interesting to go through ancient Rome and calibrate the levels of consciousness of all the Caesars and the various people that have been on the planet. All right, so that level of consciousness then is rapacious. It reached its height at the level of expression in the level of the dinosaur. And then the dinosaur went down and we saw the evolution of something else on the planet. We saw the evolution of the mammalian. We saw the evolution of that which lives without destroying other life. We see the sheep munching on the grass. We see the cow and all the domestic animals and the horse and all. It eats that which is the product of light plus chlorophyll and minerals. And then in doing that, refertilizes the ground, which makes more grass. So it not only does not kill other life, it takes the top off the grass, but it doesn't pull up its roots. And the grass comes back better than ever, having been fertilized with all kinds of manure. So you see that which lives at the price of the life of others, and you see that which lives in a mutuality with other life, in which the give and take is equal. So the grass benefits from the cow, and the cow benefits from the grass. So you might say there's two different evolutionary lines. One rapacious. So in these biologic expressions, then, we see in the human ego. People feel guilt about the ego. See, today our lecture is about transcending the opposites. I remember what it was, huh? And positionality, yeah, we got there. So, you see the evolution then of animal life. What is the animal concerned about? The animal's concerned about survival. It's concerned about territoriality. It's concerned about right and wrong. It's concerned with being an accepted member of the family or the group. And we see that, you see the evolution of consciousness. Monkeys are smart enough to know that when another tribe of monkeys has beaten them, they retreat. They retreat. The monkeys retreat. Let's see. Monkey Island is, the monkeys in the zoo, their civilization calibrates over 125, 130, 135, 135, 140. Oh, in the wild they're over 130, 135, 140. Oh, they're still 140. All right, so, wow. The monkeys calibrate at 135 or 140. We just said that the Middle East calibrates at 70. When a monkey tribe is being vanquished by the invaders, it retreats. Huh? It retreats. Well, the Germans didn't do that at the end of World War II. It was vanquished, and it went ahead and killed a few more million of Russians and had a few more million of itself killed. Japan didn't see that at the end of World War II. It took 2 atomic bombs to get it through their thick skull. I mean, that's really dumb. If you're not very bright, you don't get it the first time. So hundreds of thousands more had to go. All right, so that gives us some idea then how the ego arose. So we can stop feeling guilty. The ego is not your enemy. It's not evil, and you have to understand it. It's hard to disassemble the ego without understanding it. Many people try to do it. They go into a nice, elated spiritual state, and then they fall back again. And they don't know why they keep falling back again. To stay there, you have to disassemble the ego, and to disassemble it is to merely understand it. To merely understand it is already to disassemble it. But as you understand the ego, it's already getting weaker. By noon, your ego is going to be weaker. We forgot to calibrate the audience. Darn it. Let's do, we can do the audience as they came in this morning. They're over 410, 420, 425, 430, 431, 432, 432, that's good. 432 is great to talk to. 200 is too stupid. 432 is the world of America. That's pretty much the consciousness of America, 431, you know. That's a meritocracy that emphasizes education, intelligence, logic, reason, understanding, study. It's the springboard. Yeah, all right, springboard of civilization. Advanced civilization, civilized civilization, like America. All right, so we see the origin then of how consciousness then begins to express itself in the animal world. On one level as the voracious killer. On the other hand, it's also the benevolent mother. You don't see any love. There's no love amongst dinosaurs. Dinosaurs don't love anything. Even when they lay an egg, they walk away from it. They think it's disgusting and take off. You're on your own, kid. And frogs do the same. The lower lives, they have no capacity for maternal instinct. All right, so as this consciousness evolves then, what happens is structure begins to accommodate itself to the continuation of this form. And you have the evolution of the nervous system. You didn't need a brain until physicality doesn't need a brain. Consciousness needs a brain in which you store data. So as consciousness evolves, it learns. When you learn, you got to store data. So little computers, so the brain and the neurons as they grow according to the function. And you see that the ego is really the evolution of the animal. Everything that you see on the playground, everything that you see in Monkey Island, everything you see on the TV news is not different than the animal. The animal is interested in survival, mating, protecting boundaries, territoriality, possession, grabbing things, hoarding things, pridefulness, bragging, and gets out there, brags and gets mad, gets angry, and then it finds that by getting angry, it scares people. You see that on the playground, right? There's the ego for you. Preschool, Monkey Island, Middle East, there it is. 5:30 news on Channel 15. It learns that it can, instead of physically doing it, it can emotionally express it. It can blubber and cry and drag people all over and all this. All right, so what happens then is the forebrain, see, the intellect then, the human intelligence didn't come in as a new, different kind of brain. No, not at all. The Neanderthal man's brain got better, and Homo erectus got better. The hominid, as it evolved, got better and better. So what happened is we just added a forebrain to the old animal brain. We didn't eliminate the old animal brain, the amygdala and all these deep things that make you hate the guy who cuts in front of you in traffic is still very active, right? Flash, up comes the rage and the adrenaline before you even had a chance to think about it. And so the brain is structured to serve the animal. It's set to trigger. The anger comes up, the amygdala shoots up before your frontal cortex even gets a chance. All right, so the ego then is selfishness, self-centered, and the animal instincts become elaborated through the intellect. Now man has an intellect, so he can extend his animal nature now in more sophisticated, extensive means. He becomes more sophisticated in its expression, but it's still nothing but the animal instinct out there. Convenience, satisfaction, storage, all these things now become more advanced in their expression, but the motivation is still that of the animal. To be better than another, to be able to beat them, to be richer, to be more admired, to be the alpha male, the alpha female in the pack. That juggling for position in small groups. This one wants to be right so they can make this one wrong. Yeah, there you're wrong. Yeah. That's preschool, right? Preschool. It's the animal. It's the zoo. All right, so your ego is the zoo, a living zoo. There you go. Of course it wants to kill people that pull in front of it in traffic. Of course it does. They deserve to die. See, the difficulty with spiritual work, as a teacher, I'm trying to jump the pitfalls, to recontextualize the ego, to see its true nature and how it arose. You don't have to feel guilty about it. You don't have to crush yourself because, how could I have said that or made that mistake? How could I have been so cruel? Because you're a vicious little dinosaur inside. You'd like to chew her rotten little tail off and punch her right in the eye, wouldn't you? That's the truth of it. Okay. All right, so you got to own your animal. You own your animal. And the animal is called the ego. All right, so the ego is trained to think in terms of form. When the animal wants to eat something, it has to perceive. So the ego's primary mode is perception. If I'm going to eat this critter over here, I have to estimate the time it takes to get there, my strength as compared to that animal, etc. So the animal now lives in a world of physicality and a concrete literality, which takes its expression in the lower levels of science. Nothing is real unless it can be measured. Yeah, that is the lowest level of science. Nothing is real unless it can be measured. And in fact, there's a definition in the idiot side of science called nothing exists unless it's measurable. Okay. All right, that pretty much clips its wings as far as becoming enlightened. So, because as science advances, it realizes that kind of thinking is why it can't get any further. And it has to look to consciousness itself. That's why we have conferences on science and consciousness. The more sophisticated, the high end of the intellect in science, of course, is aware of advanced theoretical physics, subatomic, subparticle physics, and the quantum reality. How does consciousness then interface with the physicality of the world? And that takes us to quantum mechanics, which reached its height in, I would say, the 30s. And even those who don't know about quantum mechanics, I would give you a lecture on it, complete with all the mathematics, but it would put you to sleep. To prove it, you don't need to prove it any more than you need to prove that when you turn the key in the ignition, the car goes on. But everybody who has ever heard of quantum mechanics realizes that there is a microscopic reality beyond the macroscopic world. The world of observation, the world of the ego is macroscopic. However, there's something else going on in the universe, and everybody has heard of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, so we'll just state one or two things about it that's significant. Smaller than the smallest atom, smaller than the smallest particle, smaller than the electron, smaller than the photon, is a reality which has as a basic principle uncertainty. So Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is stated: things can exist either as a particle or as a wave. All exists as a potentiality. And the potentiality is influenced by consciousness, because the startling thing about Heisenberg's discovery was an observation, the second time you make it, has changed. The fact that you've observed the phenomena has already changed the phenomena. You cannot observe the same phenomena in quantum mechanics twice. The mere act of observation has already changed its potentiality and its innate energy potentiality, as well as its position. Its position already changes. We all know that intention changes results. We all know that what you hold in mind tends to potentiate, tends to materialize, sorry. What you hold in mind tends to materialize. We know that prayer is effective, not always what the kind of prayer you want. Oh, dear God, please hold the bus so I won't be late for my violin lesson. But we know that a maintained intention has a very powerful effect. And it's the most important thing karmically. It's the most important thing that determines the level of consciousness is intention. You might say that which we're accountable for is intention, not results. Let's see if that's true or not. We're responsible for intention, resist. It's the spiritual intention, the spiritual will that determines karma, resist. Right? So that keeps us from worrying about every little time we say damn and then feel guilty about it. Oh Lord, I didn't mean to say that. It's the overall intention, the alignment. It's not every little wave that hits the prow of the ship. It's that you've set the compass in this degree. This is what's going to determine where you go eventually and where you're at now, because it's all one. So we were tracking the origin of the ego. In order to disassemble it, we noticed that it originates from, its main purpose is survival within the animal world. And we don't see love evolve until the maternal. The first, you see two emergences of love. You see the bonding of male to male in the hunting pack, and you see the maternal. And then you see the bonding of the maternal as nurturance. The mother elephants and the aunts and the grandmothers will all nurture the... So they bond like men bond. So the women bond in maternal functioning. As far as love between men and women, that is a very recent thing. A couple hundred years old. Romantic love is just born on the planet. And men went off and hunted, women stayed home and made babies, and they didn't hang out with each other. What are you going to talk about, you know what I mean? Romantic love only arose a couple hundred years ago. You're really in the feudal era, where the idea of a flower to the lady of the house and all this. Women were to mate with, and men were to bond with. See, to a man, men bond with other men, and they mate with women, but they don't necessarily bond with women, as we know from the divorce rate. Women come and go, yeah. But your buddies are your buddies, you know what I mean? Your buddies are your buddies, women come and go, yeah. And women at the same time also hang together for the sake of the clan and the children and the growing up of the young ones. But romantic love is really very, very recent on a romantic level. However, we do see love evolving as companionship and friendship in play even in the early mammalian kingdom. And anybody who watches the Animal Channel sees that. Last night there was a very funny one about a parrot and a cat, I think, that bonded with each other, and they played with each other endlessly and rolled around. So you see the evolution of love. We didn't see it in the dinosaur. The dinosaurs don't really kid around. But we do see the evolution. So the capacity for play, which then evolves through the intellect, is humor. And one of the most healing modalities and useful in spiritual work is a sense of humor. And I would say, never trust a person who doesn't have a sense of humor. They'll turn you in. They're deadly. Yeah, every whistleblower is grim. We wanted to ask about the elephants. Elephants, a group of elephants calibrates over 180, 185, 190, 192. Elephants are about 192. Very interesting. They have a lot of awareness and non-verbal, non-structured awareness. There's an awareness of that they are. So let's see what that says. The elephant realizes it is resist. It realizes that others are resist. Capacity to recognize existence. Capacity to recognize existence. So that awareness is why I can't hunt, and I can't see anybody really hunting who's conscious, because I remember my father saying that one time, to be one of the boys, he went hunting with a .30 caliber deer rifle, and he finally discovered this deer in the woods, and he looked in the deer's eyes, and in that instant he couldn't kill it. He saw what it was. He saw the consciousness shining out of the deer. The deer loves its life and is aware of its existence the same as you, no different at all. It just doesn't call itself deer. But he saw that it was really existence itself coming forth as awareness of existence, and he couldn't kill it. And so he never killed anything. I've never killed anything either. It's just because you're aware that it loves its life. All that exists loves its life to the same degree that you love your life. Let's see if that's so. The deer loves its life to the same degree that we love ours. Wow, huh? It loves its life to the same degree you love yours, huh? So, that makes the Middle East look a little worse than it did this morning. All those people love their life. I don't know why that didn't cross the mind of the shoe bomber on that. The shoe bomber to me is the ultimate. I don't know, there's something about that guy. When I look at his picture even, I say, I don't believe this guy. Getting on a plane with your shoes full of bombs, blow yourself and everybody on the plane up. I mean, it is so bizarre. It's bizarre, and you know, it's funny. It's humorous. As you evolve spiritually, then what happens is you get away from good and evil, and you see things as ridiculous, absurd, nonsensical, childish, immature. I mean, the Cowboys and Indians games, we shoot 6 of them, and the next day they come back and shoot 6 of us, and the next day we go back and shoot 6 of them. I mean, is this retarded or what? So you see, the Buddha said, and so did Jesus, you know, that the basic problem is, the only basic problem is ignorance. See, we're trying to transcend good and evil by understanding the ego, how it arose, how it functions, how it expresses itself. You see the absurdity of life in its various apparently self-destructive expressions. Now, we want to get beyond positionality. This is from a book I'm working on now. All right. So we said what the ego does then, it takes a positionality, it says everything on this side is good, everything on this side is bad, but it changes its positionality. So what's good or what's evil then doesn't exist independently of itself any more than offness exists in a wire, or that falseness exists. It's very obvious that non-existence doesn't exist. It may sound superficial, but it's very profound. I think it's profound. All right, so let's see how this works. You can see that we can take a point anywhere here This is light. We can say that light is either there or it is not there. Languaging, however, takes a point here and says, well, this is light and this is dark, and they're opposites. As you can see, they are not opposites. They're only a matter of degree. And the only thing I really want you to get out of this today is there's only one variable in reality, only one. The mistake of the ego is to think there's two, and those two are opposites, and that you have to choose between the opposites, good and evil, and right and wrong and all. There is varying degrees. Light is profoundly present, or it diminishes less and less. And when it's completely absent, we call that darkness. Then, in languaging, in the dualistic style of the ego, we say there are the opposites of light and dark. Opposites of light and dark. As you can see, they're not opposite. Light is either present or not present, and it's present to a varying degree. When we'll go back briefly over the levels of consciousness and see again how that works. We can take things as far as their desirability, and we'd say, wow, this is heavenly, this is very good, this is sort of okay, this is fair middling, this is sort of lousy, this is horrible, this is terrible. Right? That's degrees of desirability. But again, you see there's no really good versus bad. There's only a matter of degrees, a matter of degrees. And then conventionally in human society, we sort of mutually agree that we will call this level of light dimness, we will call, so we label it, but the label doesn't have any actual positionality. It's so, we see all definitions then are optional definitions for pragmatic usefulness, but there are no opposites. To merely see that takes you beyond the polarity of the opposites, which is one of the great blocks to the evolution of consciousness and spiritual work. To label anything near the bottom as bad, awful, you should indulge. You see, if you label a thing at this side down, you're going to call it bad, evil, wicked. We should kill it. I should do penance. I should beat myself or commit suicide, maybe. Or you should. Why don't you kill yourself and get it over with? Do me a favor and kill yourself, will you? So, we want to just recapitulate how this, that's the wrong one, here it is. We want to recapitulate then how this translates, you see, because this is the conventional map of consciousness, in power versus force. But you see that here again, you don't have goodness versus evil. These are descriptive terms, that they are not opposites. They're all matters of degree. Matters of degree of what? They're all matters of degree of the presence of God as love. That which is beyond all form, the context out of which we all arise is over 1,000. But when it hits human consciousness, usually we calibrate it at about 1,000. So this is either the presence or the absence of love. Down here we get more to the dinosaur. What's so sad about the dinosaur is, in human expression, it takes disdain for others. Hitler said that at the end of the World War II, all the Germans deserved to die because they lost the war. In fact, he was going to burn down all of Germany, and only a few remaining generals that he hadn't assassinated, there are a few left, refused to carry out his order. He was also going to burn down Paris and destroy the Eiffel Tower, and again, his generals refused. So there were a few sane people that realized that he was quite psychotic. All right. So there was a walking dinosaur in human form, huh? All right, so we see there are no such things as opposites. That an opposite is an artifact created by an arbitrary positionality. You can choose to call this level rich, this level poor. That's why government statistics, you know, the percentage of poor below the poverty level. Well, it depends on what you set the poverty level at, you know what I mean? And those are a matter of many gradations, expectations, and what you set the poverty level at then decides on what percentage of the population is, you know, when I first came out to Sedona, I had a truck full of my old tools from my tool room. And I went to the dime store and I bought a cot. And then I found an old box, that was the table. And I put a candle on there and a book, and I was home. And I lived that way. I never even closed the doors. Animals and birds blew in and out. And you know, was I poor? I don't know. If I needed 2 candles and only had 1, then I'd be poor, right? So you did. And I got silverware. I went to garage sales. So I got silverware for like 50 cents and plates for $1. And I lived that way for a long time. Don't need anything, therefore you don't have any shortage. And if you don't have any needs, you don't have any shortage, you can't experience poverty, right? All right, so there I was with nothing at all and rich. Then I needed some cash for something, I forgot. So I had my old truck in Sedona at that time, this is the mid-70s, late 70s, people were into gardening, but there was no manure. I discovered down in a nearby town 8 miles away, there was a dairy farm with 600 head of cattle. Boy, they had a lot of manure. They heaped it up with big maw things that are like this, and then it dried, and they had tons of manure. For $10, they would take this thing, lift it up, dump it in the back of your truck, boom. I had a whole truckload, the back of the truck go down. For $10, I had a whole load of manure, and I drove it to Sedona and sold it for $55. $45. Cash, profit, minus the gas for 8 miles. So now I was well fixed. Before I wasn't in poverty, but now I was pretty well fixed, $45. All right, so you see, definition then, definition. On the other hand, back east, I can remember a time when if I didn't have like 25,000 by Monday, I was gonna lose this and that. So you see, it's just all, where is poverty? I don't know, it's where we want it to be. But there is an important point. These are not opposites. These are not the opposites of good and evil. But there is an important point. We notice if we take the temperature of water, so we need my temperature graph here, degrees Fahrenheit, okay? We notice there is something important, however. If, again, here's either the presence of heat or its absence. Heat and cold are not opposites. Cold is not the opposite of heat. You could call all this hot, you can call it hot down as far as you want. You know, minus 50 degrees, an Eskimo might say, boy, it's hot today. In Antarctica, this would be warm, wouldn't it? Minus 50. But we begin to notice something different happens, and that is a change of quality. So if this is centigrade, if this were centigrade, we notice at this point, water turns into ice. So that, now we did find out something important. There, you got that. Now you think that's upside down, don't you? That's because you're not standing on your head. If you stood on your head, if you were standing on your head, you'd say it's upside down. All right, but we do notice something critical here, which is the same as when water is 0 degrees centigrade or 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is that it changes quality. They're not opposites, but there is a major shift of quality. Here at 200, we notice, above 200, you go strong with kinesiology. Below 200, you go weak. Above 200, you nurture life. Below 200, you destroy it. So they're not opposites, but there certainly is a major change of quality. That is the error of the politically correct person, is they don't get that because of a shift of context now, the context is different. Content, the meaning of content depends on context. What's acceptable legal procedure during peacetime changes markedly the instant after Pearl Harbor. All of it changed. So the context then changes the meaning of content, what's appropriate. You have to change content then because its meaning is dependent on context. All right, context. It's politically naive to pretend that content does not change with context. Context is what gives content its meaning in the first place. So we notice here on this calibrated level that at 200 there is a change of quality. Water at 32 degrees. So if we take water and below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, it's a solid. Above 32, it turns into water. Above 212, it turns into a gas. Those are very profound changes due to shift of context. Technically, the content hasn't changed, it's still H2O. It's still H2O, but you can't pretend H2O at minus 30 degrees is the same as H2O at 32 degrees, and you can't pretend it's the same at 212 just because it's still H2O. So that is the basis of political naivete and philosophical ignorance and really sort of academic sophistry. Is the failure to realize that the quality changes, and the quality is profoundly important in a world of form. So here at 200 then, we have a critical shift of quality that is occurring without there becoming opposites. The fact that there's a shift of quality does not mean that they're opposites. H2O is still H2O, whether it's solid, liquid, or gas. So we can't say the dinosaur is evil. We can't say that bin Laden is evil. We can't say that the Middle East is evil. They calibrate down here. Their quality is considerably different because they're below the line. That which is above the line nurtures and supports life. That which is below the line is destructive of life. To see that all discernment then is a matter of positionality. All description is arbitrary. No such thing exists in and of itself. It gets you out of the hook of good versus evil. Good versus bad, good versus evil. It's the way out of guilt about the content of your own consciousness. It's the way out of hating the content of other people's consciousness. Do I hate bin Laden? No, I don't hate bin Laden. Why would I bother hating bin Laden? The guy is sort of mental, right? He belongs in a ward someplace, He's not responsible to himself, to his fellow human beings. And he said, and there he is chortling with glee that he killed 3,000 Americans, and he's going to kill Americans. So the whole idea of killing Americans is, they forget, they've got 280 million more to go. If you're going to kill all Americans, you better get busy. You better kill them around the clock, and you better do more than 3,000 at a time because they propagate faster than that. By the time you kill 3,000, there'll be 18,000 babies born already. So you better increase the speed of So, I mean, you know, it's not only futile and stupid, you know, and you worry about the destiny of the soul. Well, I guess I shouldn't worry about it. Anyway. All right, so we begin to see then things as nonsensical, idiotic, ludicrous, ridiculous. And that which is ludicrous and ridiculous is very close to that which is funny, you know? Like the joke, I don't know whether to commit suicide today or go to a movie. Why is that funny? Because it's extremely funny. You see Bin Laden saying, I don't know whether to kill 3,000 Americans today or go for a camel ride. Well, I don't recommend camel rides myself. I would never make a very good Arab. I was over there, and when you're on top of a camel, let me tell you, you're way up in the air. It's not like a horse at all. I mean, you're like up there. And I had to beg the camel driver to get me down. And he wanted $10. So help me God, he would not, hey, rich American, you give me money. I said, listen, I paid for this camel ride already. You got plenty of money, you American, give me money. You wanted $10 to get off this camel. I said, it's either that or I'm going to sit out in the hot sun all afternoon, so I gave him $10. And then he had the camel sit down. I understand camels completely, you know. And the older you get, the older a man gets, I think the more he understands camels. And yeah, and the camel. Poor old camel, like his arthritis is killing him. And he's got this mean trainer. They're mean over there. They got this whip, and if the camel doesn't behave, they whip their front legs. The camel's going, oh! So that did not make me happy with that culture at that time, anyway. All right, so you see how then life is evolving in varying degrees. We see that consciousness is really the appearance of love and the evolution of love. And you see almost a resistance to the lower energies, their dominance of life on this planet, almost in conflict with those that have a higher energy. It's almost like a battle to see who's going to dominate the planet. And of course, in 1986, what we discovered was that the consciousness level of mankind, for the first time, went over 200. And the prognosis then for mankind is considerably different. 190 means that eventually man would destroy himself. My prediction was the man was going to destroy himself. It was almost inevitable. In fact, the mechanism was already in place. You remember the Russian super bomb that if they lost the war would destroy all of life on this planet for thousands of years and millennia to come. So the megalomaniac almost won this planet, came very close, very close. And, but then what happened is consciousness went over 200, and I think it's currently still at 207. Somebody asked me, has it changed since 9/11? I don't think so. Consciousness level of mankind, we have permission to ask that in the public resist. It's over 206, 207, 208, still 207. All right, it stayed very, very low for thousands of years and then suddenly jumped to 207. The prognosis for mankind is completely different. 207 is a whole different universe than 190. 190, what Hitler did is acceptable. 190, the Middle East would be acceptable. 190, devastation and disease and ravaging others and rape and pillage is acceptable. Over 200 is no longer acceptable. It still goes on. It still goes on because the evolution of consciousness seems to evolve in certain places on the planet. The Western world as we know it tends to calibrate in the 400s. There's places, whole continents that calibrate maybe 70. The whole African continent calibrates maybe 75 or 80, in which disease and death and all such things are prevalent, and the average age of death is 26 or 29 or 30 or whatever. So we see consciousness then breaking forth in greater evolution in primarily in spots on the planet. America's about 431, I think, isn't it? America as we know it is over 400, 420, 430, 431, 432. 431 is right on where America is. That's quite a contrast with 70. You understand it's a different world. We cannot judge the Middle East, which calibrates at 70, when we're at 431, right? You understand? It's a different world. It would be like saying alligators are wrong to eat other living things in the swamp. That which lives in the swamp lives in the swamp and lives by the laws of the swamp. You understand how we're transcending good and evil, good and bad, wicked and... So what we're trying to do this morning is transcend that positionality. The most difficult one for most people in spiritual work is good versus evil. Huh? That's the one that people get hooked on, either in condemning others, which then puts them in the same point of self-judgment, or in judging themselves, which they then project onto the world and judge the world. Huh? So it's hard to watch the evening news without good and evil coming up, and the President of the United States, of course, has a very black and white idea of good and bad, and it has, pragmatically, pragmatically it works, pragmatically. When you're out in nature, there's certain things you better avoid, and then there's other things that are useful, right? So a workable pragmatism then, but he's not, for our purposes then, good and evil are different than what the president is saying. He's saying from a political point of view, he's also probably personally quite moralistic about it too, he probably believes that. But the spiritual aspirant has to forego that convenience. It's just a convenience. It'd be neat to just classify everything above as good and everything below as bad, you see? But it doesn't, the backfire of that is that you then get stuck in that duality yourself. And spiritual work means giving up judgmentalism. Judgmentalism means to transcend perception. And what that means is that you have to see it differently. You have to that means you have to contextualize it differently. So what we've been trying to do this morning is recontextualize all of life as it evolved throughout all of time, how it presents itself in various gradations, so as to transcend the positionality so you don't get stuck in the duality of the opposites. That's good enough for the moment. Should we take a break? Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. You can tell a true spiritual teacher, they always wear white socks. Why do they wear white socks? I don't know. Because they can't be bothered trying to find a pair that matches, I guess that's what it's about. Somebody asked, how does spirit energize the body? There is a disinterest in the body as you disidentify with the body, which can happen very rapidly. I always tell people, if you're into serious spiritual work, make sure that some other people know about that, because people can think they're far from the truth, and then suddenly, without warning, it comes on without warning. You're in a completely different dimension. And the physicality is actually of no interest whatsoever. Maybe it's advisable not to have people know what you're up to. I don't know when I think about it. Without other people, the physical body would be, you'd never bother with it. It would just topple over eventually. So happily, if you have people in your life that care about the continuance of that physicality, they remind you to eat and all the things that you need to do to keep it going, but left to your own devices, you'd never bother with it. Well, we were out and back talking about all kinds of interesting things, but I forgot what they were. Things I said I was going to be sure and mention, and I don't remember what I was going to mention. Huh?
Ask her to ask the question again. So maybe asked you next, whatever question.
Oh, she asked me about karma. Yeah, oh yeah, that's right. That started it off. Anyway, we said that what to worry about is a spiritual aspirant. There's nothing to worry about. Because once you're a spiritual aspirant, you've already committed to, we said, the spiritual will. In meditation and all spiritual work, the field seems to be scattered. You look at the content of consciousness, you look at the mind and the events of the world, etc. Your life seems sort of scattered, and that's sort of worrisome. Yeah, first I'm reading this book, then I'm reading this book, then I'm hearing this guru, then I'm going to that lecture. But one's spiritual commitment. So the decision of the spiritual will is what determines karma, karmic consequences, and determines the fate of the spirit. She was asking me what is the significance of it? And that, I was explaining that the universe, the entire universe is one karmic unity. Everything within this universe is related to everything else within this universe based on the laws which are of the nature of the Creator. Because the entire universe comes from one creation, therefore, the entire universe is one karmic unity. Nothing is beyond the karmic oneness of all of creation. Consequently, whether people believe it or not is irrelevant, that one's destiny is already karmically determined. Even if when you die you go into oblivion and there's nothing more, that's already karmically determined, isn't it? You didn't determine that. So even though people deny karma, that's just a conceptual thing that they're talking about. What they mean by karma, when people deny karma, what they mean is reincarnation. Well, reincarnation is one thing, karma is another. We're going to do a lecture on that, so I won't go into it extensively. But as we demonstrated, I think, in a previous lecture, Jesus Christ never had any previous physical lifetimes. He never spoke of any previous lifetimes. One reason is he never had any. Interesting, eh? The Buddha, on the other hand, had many previous lifetimes, and the Buddha spoke of it extensively. The Buddha remembered many previous lifetimes. I myself remember many lifetimes in great detail. Let's just ascertain the truth of that. Jesus Christ never had any previous physical incarnations, resist. That's correct. The Buddha had many, resist. Right. So Jesus, one reason he didn't speak about previous lifetimes and reincarnations is he never had any. And by questioning, we got that Christ did come down from heaven, that dominion, that domain, and did incarnate and never had a previous physical lifetime. The Buddha, on the other hand, evolved through countless lifetimes, and so their teachings are different. Christ came for salvation. Christ teaches salvation, Buddha teaches enlightenment. Again, don't confuse the two. They're two different things. Enlightenment is one thing, salvation is another. Yeah. How does spirit function practically in the physical body? Well, spirit doesn't really function. Spirit is like the electricity in the wire, and the electricity doesn't care what form it flows into. It could be a toaster oven, it could be a microwave. It doesn't really care because it only is what it is. It doesn't change function. So the spirit then is, you might say, is the energy of life itself. The energy of life itself manifests depending on the form in which it finds itself. How do you calibrate truth versus non-truth if you don't have a partner to do kinesiology? That's a frequent question. And a lot of people know this particular technique where the truth makes you go strong and you can't break the ring, and Bin Laden thought of that guy again. I don't know. He makes you go weak. So that's one technique you can use on your own. There's many people who know how to do it. If you go on the internet under kinesiology, there's quite a list of resources. Also, from the levels of consciousness, you can pretty much guess where you're at and where everybody else is. If this is a meritocracy where a college education, intelligence, reason, and logic, and science, the new god of the world is not religion but science, then you can pretty much know, you can guess that America's in the 400s. You don't really have to calibrate it. And so if you merely look at the levels of consciousness and see what prevails, you can pretty much guess the level of consciousness. Any difficulty, this question here really relates to healing. This really relates to healing. The letting go of negativity in all the forms in which you can tends in and of itself to have a healing effect. The letting go of judgmentalism. The Course in Miracles, I always tell everybody in the office who has any kind of an affliction, if you haven't done the Course in Miracles, you ought to do it before you die from what you got, you know. Didn't want you to worry about your hypertension, but you got a year to do the Course in Miracles. Anyway, the Course in Miracles is very, very practical. If you got cancer, high blood pressure, whatever ails you, the Course in Miracles, and I did original research on them, and they first came out, you know, and I knew the Cushes, and I knew Helen and Bill and all those people. And we had an attitudinal healing center at my clinic back east. We had the second one. Jerry Jampolsky started the first one in Tiburon. Then he and his crew came out and stayed at my house back east. I had a very large house, and we spent the weekend, and we started the second attitudinal healing center. The purpose of the attitudinal healing center was to practice the principles of the Course in Miracles, no matter what the ailment was. So we had people with multiple sclerosis, all kinds of illnesses. I've seen every kind of illness that walks the planet remit, go into remission, and heal itself. And the Institute of Noetic Sciences has records, proven medical records of something like 86,000 miraculous cures and healings from every affliction known to mankind. We noticed that beyond, I won't even say what that number is because people jump to that number and read that lesson and skip the ones that precede it. But when you get to a certain level of those lessons, you're only subject to what you hold in mind, and you can begin to deny, refuse, and release it and recover from it. And all the ailments I had when I took the Course in Miracles all disappeared. I got new ones later, but I'm working on them. No, they're not actually illnesses. Yeah. Anyway, the Course in Miracles. So I always tell everybody, if you've got a physical ailment, no matter what other spiritual work you're doing, do the Course in Miracles, because first of all, it's hysterically fun. I mean, I'll never forget the first lesson. Here I am a psychiatrist, and the lesson is, nothing your mind thinks means anything. Whoa, whoa, I almost fell off the toilet. It was hysterical. I mean, I recognized the genius as it. This is genius. Instantly, I saw the genius of it. Nothing your mind thinks means anything. Whoa. I knew this course is for me. So the course is beautiful. And, you know, Science of Mind, the 12-step groups, and Course in Miracles are all beautiful ways of transcending the negatives and putting you in a very good place. All of them will take you in the high 500s. Alcoholics Anonymous calibrates at 540. Course in Miracles calibrates at 600. So to get out of the bottom of the box and transcend to higher levels, the purpose of Christianity is really to reach 540. I mean, what Jesus Christ taught was designed to get you to 540, which is unconditional love. to pray for your enemies, to turn the other cheek, etc. To give up hatred and pray for them, to see them as ignorant rather than evil. That's all designed to get you to 540. And from 540 on, anybody who reaches 540 has no worries in this universe, because 540 is heaven and beyond, and 540 is also, I think, the lotus land of Buddhism. I never calibrated lotus land, but I think calibrated would be about the same. Lotus land is about 540 resist. Okay. So the Buddha, you see, Buddhism has various schools also. Lotus land Buddhism envisions the Buddha, who then has a different name because his function is different, as the Buddha of salvation, that you're not, there is a certain understanding that the negativity of this world is so severe that the average human is unlikely to reach enlightenment from this plane. That it's like the gravity here is so strong that to transcend the level of gravity of the consciousness of this world is so unlikely that it's better to be practical. Aim for 540, which is heaven, and from heaven you don't have to worry, because heaven at 540 is beyond the tremendous gravity of so much negativity. And so in that function, the Buddha stands for the Savior. He's the Buddha of salvation and the Buddha of Lotus Land Buddhism. So Buddhism and Christianity, the Lotus Land Buddhism and Christianity are very practical, very practical. Reach 540 and you don't have to worry, because from there on, the great beings will lift you and you'll be okay. So I don't worry about anybody once they reach 540. I don't really worry about anybody once they get to 500. And I really don't worry about anybody when they're in the 400s or even the high 300s. I did Walmart, and Power versus Force, we calibrated Walmart. And Sam Walton and I corresponded back and forth. I approved of Sam Walton because he stood for integrity. And he liked the book, and anyway, I think we calibrated Walmart. In those days it was like 380 or something. Well, 350 and up is willingness. So Walmart, when you walk into Walmart, their attitude is, how can I help you, right? That's willingness. And we have friends that if you're carrying packages out to the truck, they run over and say, can I help you? Can I help you? So that's a very positive level, when the world at the time was 190. Here's Walmart at 370 or something. So anyway, we predicted that Walmart would do well. And but 2 weeks ago, I think it was announced, Walmart has become the largest, most successful corporation in the world, in the entire world. So 350 or 360 is a lot different than Enron. To be helpful, to be integrous, to give you a good product, made in America, all those things are integrous. So I just thought it was interesting in '95, because I calibrated Walmart. I think it must have been in '94, because I did Power versus Force in '95. In '94, we already knew that Walmart was going to do well. So integrity in the long run takes you a long way. This question was about blood pressure. We wandered off the subject. The Course in Miracles, I think, is based on, what we were talking about this morning. In other words, to let it go of a positionality, which creates a duality, which puts you in good versus evil, and puts you into a polarized, dualistic belief system. So the Course in Miracles is designed to transcend that belief system, take you out of perception to a non-judgmentalism. All right, non-judgmentalism. So the Course in Miracles then is based on forgiveness. In order to forgive, you have to have already made a judgment. To have made a judgment, you've had to adopt a positionality. So our purpose this morning is in a way the same as the Course in Miracles, to transcend positionality, stop seeing it as good and evil. We don't have to hate Bin Laden. We don't have to hate dinosaurs. Don't have to hate them. I wouldn't hang out with them, though, because they'll eat you alive. But It doesn't mean you have to become stupid. It just means that you have to comprehend that which you experience from a different context. And spiritual work is really one of identifying with a more and more diffuse context, getting away from the specifics of content. We're going to do a lecture later on meditative techniques, and there's a meditative technique in which one focuses primarily on peripheral vision, which anybody can do. It's working in the same direction as the Course in Miracles or consciousness research such as we're doing. As you walk about the world, instead of focusing on the content and the itty-bitty nitty-gritties, you focus on the context, the overall space in which you are, the overall space and the intention for which you're in this space. In other words, you identify with the context out of which life arises, and then of course at this moment is taking this form, but your identification becomes progressively less with this body and this table and this particular audience, and it eventually takes you to existence itself. So as you let go, identifying with and focusing on content, you realize that you are the context. You thought you were the content, and you realize, oh, I'm the context in which it's all happening. I'm the theater. I thought I was the play. Oh, you're not the play, you're the theater. So constantly expanding context means then you're less and less vulnerable to what people say and do because they're more like in a movie, you see? This actor says this, and this actor says this, and there's no point in taking it personally because it's all just happening in a movie and it has nothing to do with you, because that which you are is the context, the awareness, and not the content. You're not the content. You know? So the less you identify yourself as this thing here, saying this thing here, you're more the witness of what's happening. You're the witness. So you're the witness of what's happening in the Middle East. You don't have to make it right or wrong. You don't have to feel bad about it. You don't have to try and change it. Ramana Maharshi, who is well known to probably many of you here, has said there's no point to try to change the world because the world you see is just a perceptual illusion. There's nothing that needs changing. If the world is one big, huge karmic unity, then what is it you're going to do that's going to change all that? As General Powell just discovered. I could have saved him the bus fare to begin with. Well, I'm sure he knew that too. But anyway, he went through the motions because otherwise we don't look like we're for peace, you know, all the BS that goes on. So to look like we're for peace, he's got to go through the actions and all. They don't want peace anymore than the man on the moon, you know. Why would they want peace? I mean, their whole life is war. So, the Palestinians, as a people, want peace. Resist. The Palestinians, the Israelis, as a people, want peace. Resist. The politicians involved want peace. Resist. Okay, politicians don't want peace. So, you send a politician to talk to politicians who don't want peace to go for peace, and you know, they don't like Wheaties. You know, selling to some Wheaties, they've already made up their mind they don't want any Wheaties. All right, so is that right or wrong? Neither one. Is it something we should desire or not desire? Neither one. Ramana Maharshi says, the world you see is a projection of the ego, which is what we're seeing this morning. So how to then change what it is you're projecting? So we won't see the Middle East as good or evil. We'll see that it's not too evolved, right? 70 is not too far along. it's over here someplace. It's not too far along in the evolution of consciousness. It's sort of not too far from where we showed this last week, but I just wanted, or last time, for those of you who haven't seen it. All right, that's the next one. So you see, where is this thing? Population percentage. Wow. Oh, the world specified. I see. Where's 70? Oh, golly. Way over here. Wow. So it's a pretty dark place to be, right? The dark place to be. That's all. To transcend good, the opposites of good and evil, right and wrong, is already a major spiritual advancement, because it means to let go of positionality and judgmentalism. A positionality is, after all, a judgment. The Course in Miracles says, let go of all judgments, and then perception is replaced by vision. You see the magnificence and the beauty of life without projecting anything onto it. So that which is, then, is beyond categorization and beyond descriptive terms. And it just stands forth in the brilliance of the divinity of its creator. All that exists is innately a manifestation of God. The non-form within form is the presence of God within all of creation. Nothing can exist otherwise. And the letting go of positionality, then, in one instance, suddenly, at least in this experience, there were a number of experiences, incredibly beautiful. The snowbank and with my father and many other similar ones. But the one that happened in '65 was very sudden and unexpected, in which all becomes totally silent. And the wording and the talking that people do, which to this day I have difficulty understanding, and I have to say what many times, because it's the silence that predominates, and the noise is, the words, the verbiage is in the background. And you have to focus on it and bring the verbiage in across the silence. In ordinary life, sound predominates. People don't notice silence because they're hearing the birds and the talking and the movie going on, and their focus is on the sound. But you understand you cannot hear sound except against a background of silence. It's because of silence that you can hear sound. Without silence, you can't hear any sound. For the same reason that without the emptiness of space, you could not discern an object. Without the non-form of consciousness, you would not be able to comprehend, perceive form. It's because of the formlessness of consciousness you can perceive form. It's because of the silence that you can hear sound. And in that state, one is the silence and not the sound. And people are into sound all the time. And anyway, in trying to readjust to the world, one has to readjust to focusing on sound and verbiage and meaning and all that, but it's tiring. And you have to say what all the time. Which makes you sort of stupid, but if people will explain it, then I guess your intention to comprehend is what makes it comprehensible, you know. Otherwise, it's not really comprehensible. It's because the presence prevails as the primary reality of which you're aware, you know. Were there any more questions before we go on? I think I answered them all.
When you said the Middle East was 65,
Yeah.
I'm curious to know whether if you looked at the different components of that, say Israel, the Palestinians, maybe something, that would be different.
No, because my interest is in the context, and not the content. My interest is in the context of the phenomena. So the phenomena, see, because I'm not interested in identities. The phenomena is coming out of an energy field at about 70. That's the field that prevails there. And those people are dominated by that level of consciousness. So 70 is dominating the field there. Just like in other situations, other levels of consciousness. Let's say in everyday America, the prevailing level is 431. That's the level you're expected to live up to. You're expected to be able to read and write and know how to make out your income tax. Because so the expectation of our world is 431. Intelligence, education, vocabulary, responsibility, reasonable degree of mathematics. You're supposed to know how to work a VCR. You're not supposed to have your light thing blinking on your VCR. 70, those people are expected to be that way, and you know how people live up to what is expected of them. So at 70, their society is expecting this. Their politicians are presenting that as the ideal, just as Stalin presented the ideals of Lenin as an ideal for their society, and everybody then tries to live up to that ideal due to sort of mob psychology, you know. I think they expect themselves and each other to behave in that manner. The world of the spleen is tit for tat, this for that, and getting even. So every night's headline is they killed 12 on this side, and then the next day they killed 12 to get even, and then they killed 12 to get even, and so the expectation then is sort of that the schoolyard boys in a fight, you're not going to let them get away with that, are you? So you've got to punch him back, otherwise you look like a coward. So you're more or less almost forced into a fight that you don't believe in, because prevailing social pressure is that you need to continue to fight. Fighting is part of the energy field of 70, yes?
Could you repeat what you said at the beginning about, I think you said there were 3 different elements you needed in order to make the kinesiology testing work? About consciousness level in the person?
Well, all we said was that the conscious level of the participants, or the person who's doing it by themselves, has to be over 200, has to be integrous. And the intention of the question has to be integrous. Sometimes I refuse certain questions because I get what the intention is behind the question. And therefore it's not really appropriate to do it. When you're identifying more with context than with content, then you see you become the context. You don't become the context. You identify, you realize that you are the context out of which it is all arising. It is because of your consciousness, the presence of your consciousness, that the mind is thinking thoughts without your consciousness there. So you are that which activates the mind to even think. So your identifications become progressively more one of context. And the self, with a capital S, is that out of which, and at one with all that is. So as you let go with content, you become more and more context. Yeah, that sort of takes us up the hill here. Anyway, I just thought that's sort of interesting. See, when you look on this, then your expectations of the world change. You say, where is 200 here? Huh? 200. This much of the world population is not up to the level of integrity yet. So you can't expect them to be integrous because they're not there yet. It would be like asking a Tyrannosaurus Rex to please be considerate of the feelings of that little goblin-looking thing you just ate, you know. It doesn't much care about that. So these are really, enlightenment then is really, I don't know how you work this thing. Divinity and all the levels of enlightenment and sages and enlightened beings and Buddhas and Christs and Krishnas and all you're talking about is what the person knows as what or who they are. Huh? Enlightenment is 600. So when we go up that little levels of consciousness, one goes up through lovingness, the willingness to surrender judgmentalism, to get to 540, which is unconditional love. Unconditional means you've got to let go right and wrong. And begin to see that it's not appropriate, it's irrelevant. That's done in 12-step groups all the time. And I use an example. The guy runs over 3 people, burns down a house, and goes to a meeting next day, and they say, "George, we're sure glad to see you here. You sure belong here." That's all they care, is that he's at a meeting where he needs to be. All right, so it means the willingness to forego judgmentalism. The way you transcend judgmentalism is the willingness to forego it. How can you forego it? You can forego it because you see it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. If a dog is biting your ankle, it's irrelevant whether the dog is a bad dog or not. He's biting your ankle. You know what I'm saying? This is not the time to hang out and decide whether he's a good or a bad dog, you see? Whether what goes on in the Middle East is good or bad is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. So it's really that you transcend judgmentalism because you see it's irrelevant. It's a so what. So the way you transcend right and wrong and judgmentalism is you see that it's just a so what. I mean, so what? You know what I mean? The guy was wrong when he did so and so. Well, so what? So he was wrong. So big deal. In other words, one gives up the trying to juice it. Huh? See, what people do with right and wrong is they want to juice it. The people like judgmentalism and right and wrongness and morality because you get to be on the good side and you can juice it. You hate to say that you're better than they are, but you know it. See? I hate to tell you you're wrong, brother, but you know you're wrong, you know. To be polite, you don't say it, but you know it. He's a creep. You all know he's a creep. All right, so the lower levels of consciousness all have their payoff. The way you transcend them, you don't have to transcend those levels of judgment. All you have to do is transcend to say no to the payoff. And as you let go of the payoff, they disappear. When you don't take glee in putting your thumb in somebody's eye anymore, you stop putting your thumb in people's eye. It's because you're getting off on it. Take that, you. What's those people on television every night on television, throwing rocks at the Israelis, and the other side, the Israeli kids are throwing rocks at the Palestinians. I mean, they're just loving it. You see that? Man, they're having such a ball. Take that, take that. It's the juice they get out of it that hooks them in it. So people, the ego, what is the ego addicted to? This is a great moment in history. The ego is addicted to the juice it gets out of its positionalities. That's what keeps it in place. It gets off on it.